Hello guys, it's Derek Tafumo here, derektafumo.com. I'm back again on this Facebook Live on my page to talk to you about the bond notes and what I think has triggered the sudden fall in the value of the bond note, which has been valued at 1:1 to the US dollar. But in recent days, it has gone down to at least 1.4 to the US dollar. So there are issues with the bond note, and I'll try to explain some of the reasons why I think the bond note is going down the way that it has been going down. So first of all, there were pictures which I think triggered most of the mayhem that we see on the streets today. They were triggered by pictures of newly minted bond notes, which can only be from a bank, whether it's the Reserve Bank or it's any of the other banks. It's a question that it's something that a lot of people, we don't know where exactly they've come from, but it's easy to find out where they've come from because they have serial numbers. So if the police can investigate, they will be able to find out exactly where those banknotes have come from, whether they've come directly from the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe or they've come from another bank. And the bank obviously would have got the notes from the Reserve Bank. But if they're on the streets in that condition, it means that someone knows where they've come from. So they were newly minted, and they reminded people of 2008 when we had so many notes on the streets. And because the rate has changed, which means you need at least 140 of these bond notes to get $100 US instead of 100 bond notes for $100 US. Okay, and there are more pictures which were showing wads of notes, which is a reminder of what happened in 2008 when we had a lot of these worthless pieces of paper that could not buy much. Okay, so these are some of the pictures that showed up on the day in question when the crash started to happen. Okay, so what could have happened? I think currency is dictated by the law of supply and demand, and in this case, if there is greater demand for the US dollar, then the value of the US dollar goes up in terms of the bond note. So instead of getting $1 for every one bond note, you're getting 1.4 bond notes for US dollar. There are so many different price rates, which it depending on where you are. And so the greater demand for the US is a reason why there's a fall in value of the bond note. So the value of the US is higher, and sometimes it's due to speculation because there is lack of trust in the bond note. So people are trying to get rid of it, and if people are trying to get rid of it and trying to get the US dollar, it means that the US dollar is going to fetch a higher premium of the bond note. Okay, so one of the things that most people are not aware of is that there are currency wars around the world. So the US dollar is fighting a war with the Chinese currency, with the British pound. There are currency wars taking place. And when we introduce a currency, it's going into that battlefield of currency wars. So we have fiat currency, which basically means it's a currency which is not backed by any straightforward physical a physical mineral like gold or diamond or something like that. So if it's fiat, it means the country has just fixed. They've just told you that this is what this currency is worth, and it remains that way because of the trust that people have in that currency. And for me, the United States dollar is derived, its value is derived from the fact that not only is it a reserve currency, but it's also a petrodollar. It is the number one currency for buying crude oil from the Middle East, and some agreement has been signed where every country has to buy petrol, or they have to buy their crude oil from the Middle East in US dollars. So every country that needs to buy fuel needs to get US dollars. So that way, the fiat currency is being backed by a commodity that everyone else wants to buy. So there's a greater demand for the US dollar than for any other currency, because, as you know, every country needs petrol, every country needs crude oil, every country needs this mineral for its own energy needs. Okay, so there is greater demand for the US dollar. Now, we've had a history with bearer checks, and it is because of the history of the bearer checks that people were a little bit skeptical about the bond note. So they remember very well what happened in 2008. They know what happened. They know that the bearer checks became worthless, and they have predicted when the bond notes were introduced that probably the same thing was going to happen. This has been the problem in Zimbabwe in terms of reintroducing the national currency, the Zimbabwe dollar, because it is still the same people in power who presided over the fall of the Zimbabwe dollar, who introduced bearer checks, which did not do very well, and the bond notes are just bearer checks by any other name. They are, because the government is able to print as much as they want. We know that inflation is going to take place as we speak. Basic commodities are disappearing off the shelves, so their prices are going upwards without notice, maybe 2-3 times a day, which is reminiscent of exactly what happened in 2008. So there is lack of trust, and the economy is all about trust. So, for example, the shortages that we're seeing in shops today are because people are panic buying. So if people panic buy, then the shelves are going to look empty. And if you have not bought anything yet, then you're going to panic. And the next time you see something on the shelves, you're also going to buy the whole lot. So we end up with retailers raising their prices because they can see that there's a lot of demand for it. So at the end of the day, it is a question of trust. If you know that something is going to be there tomorrow, there is no need for you to panic buy. But if you do not trust that it's going to be there, then you're going to panic buy. This is exactly what is happening in that economy today. It could happen in any country if there was no trust. But for example, the US dollar, we trust that it's going to be one US dollar is going to be $1 US tomorrow, it's going to be $1 US next week. It's going to be $1 US a month or a year from now, bearing in mind, of course, that there is a little gradual inflation taking place, but it's not something that is going to make people mistrust the US dollar. So the economy is exactly the same. If it was not for the trust in the structures which have been put in place in the United States, then we would have seen the election of people like Donald Trump may be having a negative impact on the economy, on the trust, but they know that structures have been put in place where the value of the US dollar is independent of the politics that is going on. Okay, so economics is about trust. Economics is about trust, and it's about trying to sort out inequality. Inequality is the thing which makes people want to either go into business or go into politics. So what is politics in terms of economics? Politics is simply the macro approach or the macro solution to conflict resolution or inequality. So if there is inequality and we want to address the inequality at a macro level, then politics is the way to get into power, to be in charge, to make those changes wholesale. But if you want to go micro, the micro approach is to go into entrepreneurship. It's solving the little problem that you understand, because the economy is made up of a range of problems. There are so many issues that can be solved. So the micro approach is to zero in on your strength, on the things that you're able to solve. And if each and every person is able to focus on the things that they can solve, then we can achieve the same effect, because entrepreneurs will then be able to employ people. And when you employ people, you are resolving the problem of inequality. But if you know where the source of the problem is and it's political, then the macro approach is something that other people would rather go for than the micro approach, because the micro can also be affected by the politics of the day and what is going on there. So I think perception management is an issue that needs to be handled very well so that you can instill some confidence in the economy. So if the perception is wrong, then even entrepreneurs will find it difficult to operate, and people go for the political solution or the macro approach if there is a problem with managing perception by those who are in power. Okay, so I've got a few solutions here which I think might make the situation a lot better. So we have to admit failure first of all, and admitting failure will instill confidence in the people who are able to offer solutions, because the solutions are there. The people to offer the solutions are there. They only need for the government to accept or to admit that they have failed, and to allow and to consult people and to allow people to put their inputs. When it comes to the bond notes, for example, the government was told point blank that this was not going to work. So if the people say it's not going to work, and they are the ones who help to instill the confidence or the trust issues, then if you don't listen to those people, you are making a big mistake. So, I mean, we have to understand also that we are living in an age where physical wars have gone down, but economic wars or economic warfare and currency wars are the order of the day. You know, there are fluctuations in currencies every day, and different currencies are fighting each other. So I think we need to, as a country, we need to be able to have a conversation. We're not having that conversation. There is polarization between the major political parties. There's infighting within some of the parties, especially the party in power right now. ZANU-PF has got internal factional fights, okay, which mean that they are taking energy away from managing the country to managing the possible, leadership change that is going to take place, because the president is now at an advanced age, and so there could be a change at any time, and they are trying to manage that, but there is infighting between the different factions in the ruling party. So if we can talk as a country, then we should also talk as a region. We should talk as a continent. The African Union, for example, SADC, ECOWAS, and other economic blocs, we should be able to come together and say, what is money, what is currency, what should we do? Should we have an AU currency? Should we have a SADC currency? Should we have an ECOWAS currency? Should we have an African currency? So if we cannot create capital from dead capital, and we've got dead capital lying all around us. For example, I gave the example of cats. In the West, a cat is an important economic driver because it employs a lot of people. It employs the vets who look after it, who have its medical records. It employs the person who sells cat merchandise on eBay. It employs the insurance companies for people who want to buy pet insurance. The food aisles there are food aisles dedicated just to cats and other pets in supermarkets. So there's a lot that's going on with just a cat. And in Africa, for example, in Zimbabwe, that is dead capital because we kick them around, kick those cats around on the streets. And it's with all the pets, with dogs and all that, dog collars. They make a lot of money people make money just selling dog collars. So there's a lot that we can do. For example, the rural population in Zimbabwe is about 70% of the country's population is rural based, and those people are not economically active to the extent that they can contribute quite immensely to the national economy. I always think that we probably have 3 or 4 different economies running in Zimbabwe. We have the rural economy, where if a person sells a goat, the treasury has no idea that transaction has taken place, and so no taxes are collected. And there are so many things that people are selling to each other in the rural areas, which do not get the attention of the treasury because we don't have systems in place to be able to record every transaction which is taking place. So there are transactions which are taking place. So there is an economy going on, but it's outside of the mainstream economy. It's outside of the economy that's taking place in towns or urban areas, for example, where you have people who are buying things from shops and they are paying VAT. In the rural areas, they are not paying VAT. Then you've got this economy which is being run by the very wealthy, politically connected, and the politicians as well, who can import vehicles worth millions, and we don't know if these people are even paying tax for those things. So we need to think about debt capital, which is not only in Zimbabwe but all across Africa. Just one cat can generate so much employment and so much business in the West, whereas in Africa it's not doing the same. Okay, so yeah, there is my cat example. You can buy cat food. Okay, so there are companies that make the cat food, and the vet is employed. They go to university. They learn to operate, carry out surgery, and if you go to any of the places where pets have to be taken, you'll see there's a queue. There are people in there waiting to be served their appointments, and so the cat is employing the vet, is employing the person who is selling the cat food, is employing the insurance companies, the accessories guys who are selling little clothes, maybe a collar, a cat collar or a dog collar and stuff like that, shampoo to wash the cats. So there's a lot going on just to look after a cat. So a cat in Zimbabwe is dead capital because we don't have those industries which are helping to look after. And sometimes it just takes a government to say, okay, every cat should have a medical record or they'll be confiscated. Every cat should have a cat collar to identify it. And so it's just things like that that could resurrect the dead capital in these places. Okay, so I've talked about rural population as dead capital, rural urban diaspora, and politicians. 4 different types of economies running concurrently, and there is no. Imagine if the diaspora could team up with the rural population in Zimbabwe and come up with ways in which they can fund development of certain things like schools and hospitals. Imagine if the diaspora could team up and say maybe make contributions, and in those contributions they could build maybe a block of flats or a shopping mall, and then they could have shares in which they benefit from the business which is taking place, maybe from the rent of the block of flats or from the rent from people who are using a shopping mall, for example. And politicians could do well by maybe trying to talk to the diaspora and in a way in which they are looking for such deals to take place where the diaspora can pour in some investment capital into Zimbabwe, for example. But before we do that, there has got to be trust, and it is this trust which is missing. Okay. Then I looked at minerals revenue, gold and diamonds. Okay. It's almost dead capital because we don't know where it's going. Okay. We know that we have gold, we have diamonds, we have deposits of other rare minerals, but we don't know where this money is going. We could encourage tourism for locals, because if you're not encouraging domestic consumption for goods and services, then you are not encouraging manufacturers to manufacture anything that is going to serve the domestic economy. Okay. So thank you for listening, guys. It's Derek Tafuma here of DerekTafuma.com. I've come to the end of this little presentation. And just to recap, I was looking at the bond notes and what could have triggered their sudden fall. Then I was also looking at what could have happened. Is it just a law of demand and supply? Is it greater demand for the USD? Why is there greater demand for the US dollar? Is the value of the US dollar higher? Why is it higher? Why are people speculating? Fiat currencies. Why are other fiat currencies succeeding where ours, as the bond note, is not succeeding? Is the bearer, the recent history of the bearer checks in 2008 causing a problem for the bond notes in terms of lack of trust in an economy which should really be about trust? Okay, how are we addressing inequality? Are we looking at the macro approach, which is politics, or are we looking at the micro approach, which is entrepreneurship? By the way, the government has got the mobilization capacity to institute or to put in place infrastructure such as railways, such as airports, such as the road network, such as energy generation, and also to manage perception. You do not manage perception by showing largesse in the way that you're spending and just traveling wherever you want, when we have a situation of inequality which is very graphic, where we can see that people are struggling. So the perception is that ZANU-PF, there's a cartoon that I've just seen today, where it shows a divide between the ZANU-PF rich and the rest of the population which is living in poverty. Okay, so what are the solutions? Do we admit failure? Is the government, should they admit failure? Should they be aware of current wars and economic warfare? When they launched that board note, they should have known that it's going to face resistance from other currencies. Okay, how do you create capital from dead capital? And I gave an example of a cat. Okay, how does a cat employ so many people? If you look at dogs, for example, there are people who basically just for a living they walk other people's dogs. Okay, they look after other people's dogs when people have gone on holiday or they have gone to work, stuff like that. So a lot of that capital in Zimbabwe, tourism, local tourism, domestic demand for goods and services, minerals revenue from diamonds and gold and other minerals. We have 4 or 5 different economies running in the same country, and they are not communicating. And then we have a rural population whose transactions are not really being recorded anywhere, so we don't know what's happening there. We know that the goats are being sold, cattle are being sold, and stuff like that. 7 days beer brew is being sold, but no one is collecting taxes on that. Okay, so guys, again, thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next video.